This week on GTA 5 o'clock, finally we've seen it. Rockstar show us 30 minutes of new gameplay. All three characters in all new locations. We see a brand new mission in action, plus car modding, scuba diving, side missions, property and more. The only show with all the info. It's this week's essential episode of GTA 5 o'clock. Hi, welcome to this week's episode of GTA 5 o'clock. I'm Tim Weaver. I'm here with Dan Dawkins. Hello, Dan.
Hello there.
Okay, so Dan, we're going to give the listeners a blow-by-blow account of exactly what we saw yesterday. From beginning to end, we saw a 30 to 35 minute demo. During the course of this video, you can zip to any point in the video. We've divided it into 4 sections. Franklin, Trevor, Michael, and a 15-minute mission we saw as well. And you can zip between those by clicking the links on the screen at any time. Over the coming weeks, we're going to be taking what we saw in the mission and really going into intense, super microscopic detail about everything we saw. But today we're just going to give you more of an overview of what we saw. That doesn't mean we'll be scrimping on detail, far from it. Dan, your gut reaction?
Yeah, I mean, it was basically fantastic. I was a little bit worried because obviously we've been doing the show for like nigh on 4 to 5 months. We're talking about it every week, and there's the thing in the back of your mind of maybe I'm going to see it and like not be blown away.
Yeah.
I'd gone in and kind of, I guess in a way, kept my expectations low. Because you're thinking, you know, hey, this console's 6 years old. Technically, what can it really do to impress you? But right from the get-go, the minute I saw GTA 5 in action, I don't want to sound like some sort of hyperbolic crazy here, but from the minute I saw it in action, my thought was, everything's going to be all right.
Yeah, that's exactly what I felt. I said to the guys at Rockstar, actually, I felt going into it, I had this kind of picture of GTA 4 in my mind of how GTA 4 looked, and I guess I'd sort of based everything we've chatted about over the past few weeks, all the trailers we've seen and stuff. Despite all that, I still had this kind of view of GTA 4 in my head. But actually, you know, visually and technically, it's such a leap.
Yeah. Such
a leap on from GTA 4, and I think that was what blew me away from the moment that it opened up, as you say, and we'll get onto that in just a second. I thought exactly the same as you. This is going to be fine. Dan, we sat down. The demo started. Tell us how it kind of opened up.
Yeah, well, Rockstar are great at creating a big mood and a big scene. So we're sat in Rockstar's like big moody demo room. They've got an enormous kind of 60-inch Hyper HD TV. The screen starts off on, you know, it's black, and it was like basically press X to launch the game.
We were obviously demoed it on PlayStation 3.
Yeah, demoed on PlayStation 3. You know, you press X to launch into the demo. The very first thing you see is like over the shoulder of Franklin, and he's in a helicopter, and he's buzzing over like huge expanse of land, which I think we know is the Alamo Sea area, and again that's linked to Mount Chiliad. And you see over his shoulder, and he's like looking down on the ground below, and it's such a stunning vista. It's a real, like, you know, your entry to the world is here. It's obviously very well orchestrated and staged, and just straight away, I mean, I thought visually, you know, like, apart from the detail on the Franklin model, which was good and solid, the thing that struck me was just like quite how far you can see into the distance. Yeah,
I mean, even while he was in the helicopter, just over his shoulder, you could see. I think you could see Mount Chiliad. Oh no, what was the name of the mountain you could see? Mount Gisia, I think they called it. Anyway, you could see the mountains. You could see the ridges of the mountains. You could see forested kind of hillsides. You know, forests in the sort of folds of the mountains. You could glimpse trails in the mountains, both sort of what I assume to be biking trails and also roads.
Yeah.
And there was like a river beautifully kind of glinting as well, and that was just from over his shoulder.
And we're like, you know, we're thousands of feet up at this stage, and again, nothing's really happened. And what it brings so immediately is the fact that all the screenshots you've seen, apart from maybe the resolution looking a little bit crisper, there's no lies in those screenshots. Like, you know, in terms of, it wasn't like the background was popping in or out, or things were suddenly appearing as you got close. It really did feel like, you know, you could see it all.
Yeah, I think it was purely a resolution thing. That was the only real difference. In terms of the scale and ambition of the game, it was immediately obvious straight off the bat, even before anything had happened, and he was sort of standing there in the exit hatch of the helicopter.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened next, Tim?
So next he jumped. He jumped out into the great unknown, out into the air, and he sort of skydived for a little bit without putting his chute up, didn't he? And they kind of moved the camera slowly as we were looking at it from left to right. Immediately in front of us, immediately when he came out of the door and started sort of descending his descent, we could see city of Los Santos, kind of in the distance, sort of in a grey-blue kind of haze.
Yeah.
You could see the skyscrapers, you could see the kind of ocean beyond it, and then they started moving the camera kind of left to right, and there was what we thought originally was an airport, but actually Rockstar called it an air base, and I'm assuming it's a military base.
They did on more than one occasion during our demo make reference to a military base within like the world of GTA 5. So that was like, again, we'll talk about it more later, but that's exciting in terms of like what's in that military base. Let's be honest, probably some pretty hardcore equipment.
Yeah. And there, Dan, they kind of continued sort of moving the camera around, but they stopped at a certain point moving the camera around, I noticed. And I don't know whether that's because kind of back, in the opposite direction of Los Santos, there's like things yet to be revealed, or maybe that the demo just, that stuff hasn't been built into the game yet. I mean, I wouldn't like to kind of assume, but we kind of had like a 180-degree vista, I guess, of the environment around us, maybe a touch more.
Yeah, I think again, we know that the Rockstar told us this is happening on like the north of the island, as they described it, and this is in line with. There's been some great work done on GTA forums and various websites where they've mapped what they believe to be Los Santos, and I think this was like, it felt like it was exactly in line with what had been done.
Yeah, there's one in particular I think we found on the GTA forums that a guy or a girl has done, which is pretty close, I think, to what we saw in the game. But yeah, there's a couple of that are really good and give you a really good overview of exactly what it looks like. I think our understanding, Dan, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that Los Santos is on the ocean on the south side of the island.
Yeah.
And the Alamo Sea area where Trevor lives is on the north side of the island.
Yeah.
And kind of in between there, a sort of a spine of mountains, kind of going from left to right, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing to get across is, obviously, technically it's really strong, as in the draw distance is good, the resolution's decent. The thing that struck me is kind of the filtering and the way they're doing the clouds, and what we've seen in previous videos, even like the Epsilon project video of the rolling cloud, the 24-hour cycle. All that stuff's in there. There's a real sense of like a dynamic environment, and it's all twinned to the fact that as you're descending, the soundtrack, which was the first illustration we had of the dynamic soundtrack.
Oh yeah. That's
so when he's up in the clouds dropping down, you can sort of hear, like, as I remember, you could hear like the flapping of like you're coming down. There's a real sense of speed and being in the air, but there was this sort of beautiful melodic ambient soundtrack. It was something like you'd have heard on The Journey in GTA 4, and it just gave you like a sense of wonder and discovery, of dropping into the world. And I feel like I've gone mad, like I'm some mad old romantic or something, but it genuinely was like beautiful. And all the reasons that we love GTA, all the reasons you love San Andreas, just about being at one with nature. It really captured that, but on a technical level, we've not seen before, and in line with what we've seen in the screenshots.
One thing that was immediately obvious as well, as Franklin was kind of descending in the air, was just how much geographical diversity Los Santos and Blaine County offer Rockstar above and beyond what Liberty City could offer them in GTA 4. Liberty City was a very, would it be fair to say, a sort of quite brown grey kind of environment. That it was
city.
Listen, it was. I'm not disparaging their work on it, and I'm certainly not criticising them for the way they represented New York Liberty City. They did a brilliant job of that. That's not. It's
no rolling hills in the middle of New York. Is it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they were restricted by the environment that they based Liberty City on, and by basing Los Santos so closely on the Los Angeles County area, they've really been able to go to town on the world beyond the city. And what was immediately obvious was that the city actually is not a massive part of the entire environment, or at least it didn't look like it. I mean, I'm sure once you're in the city, it'll seem like a huge place, but there was so much countryside.
Yeah.
And, as we'll get onto later, sort of beach area and sea area, that it really gave the impression, I think that when you play it, it will feel like there's much more variety than GTA 4, just simply because the environments are so different.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I mean, it's hard to put a percentage on it, but it felt like maybe like an 1/8 to a 10th of what you could see was city. But like, we'll get to this later on, but when you're with Michael and there is a section in the city, you do feel intoxicated and immersed in dense city life. And the contrast is like it was in San Andreas, really stark. We'll talk about Michael's section later on. I wanted to talk a bit about the mechanics of being in the parachute. Now obviously we didn't get to play it, but what you could see is it looked, in terms of the parachuting, quite similar to what you've seen in San Andreas. But there was, in the bottom left of the screen, like a little radar which had become like an altimeter, and you could see like an artificial horizon to give you a sense of where you were and how you were dropping. And I guess you could, like they were, moving the right camera all the time to position where you were. So again, there's not a lot to report in terms of the gameplay, but that was worth noting.
It was nice as well because the guy who demoed it to us sort of brought, once Franklin put up his parachute, which he did after, I don't know, 10, maybe 15 seconds. There was that ambient soundtrack, really, because it was hard to hear that ambient soundtrack when he was without his parachute up. But once that parachute went up, you got this real sense of kind of calm and peace as you sort of descended into this beautiful kind of carpeted valley.
Yeah. I mean, and as he came into land, what you could see was more of the detail, of the land, and it was quite unique seeing. You could see like an animal moving along, and we were like, "Well, what's that?" And they said, "Well, that's a mountain lion."
Yeah.
And it sounds like it wasn't elaborated on, but it sounds like you'd be able to interact with the animals like that.
Yeah.
And you could also see like winding sort of Mount Chiliad style roads that we've seen in screenshots, and you could see like like pickups and stuff driving along, and there were like people going about their business on the world, And
I think we saw a quad bike as well.
There were quad bikes.
Yeah.
Definitely were quad bikes.
Yeah.
And I just think, you the sense of descending into an actual world where people are going about their business. I mean, is there anything else to say about the descent? Oh, there is one thing to say. As you were dropping up and they panned the camera up, you could see like a jetliner elsewhere in the skies scooping across the horizon.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I thought that was great. I mean, I'd love to know if that's like a real jetliner or like a background never interact with it jetliner. But the idea of there being like scheduled flights or something is fantastic.
I wonder if that might have come from the airbase. I forgot to kind of take note of that, but anyway, it was nice. It's nice incidental detail, and like you say, what was impressive was that it gave the sense of a world kind of ticking over, even as Franklin goes about his business. The business in this case of descending into a valley after base jumping out of a helicopter.
So I mean, we've obviously spent like absolutely ages waxing lyrical about falling out of the sky. Like, what happens then when he lands?
So he lands next to a river, which reminded me a little bit of Elder Scrolls. It had that sort of like glorious kind of shimmering kind of feel to it, and it was banked on both sides. And I think I'm right in saying that a trail kind of went up and around the river, and sort of traced it around, and he landed basically next to, was it a husband and wife, or was it two men? I'm not sure.
Yeah, there was like, I think I can't remember. There was like a couple, and they were fishing, weren't they?
They were fishing in the river, yeah. And they next to them there was their Winnebago, which presumably you could, if you wanted to, steal.
Yeah.
And presumably, if you really wanted to, you could put the husband and the wife in the river, or I'm not sure he was armed actually, but presumably you can punch them if you're so inclined, I guess. But we didn't, in our demo, the sense of peace wasn't disturbed in that way.
We didn't turn into a maniac all of a sudden, so it was all about setting the scene, I think, and showing the visuals. I thought when you land in the river, and it looks a little bit like sort of the bottom bit of some of the areas we've seen surrounding Mount Chiliad, and some of those scenes with the, you know, the overhead bridges and that they've had the trains on them. It felt like this sort of riverland, and the water itself, you know, that was the notable bit, as in to see it sort of gurgling and rushing along. Again, you know, it looked a bit like the video we've seen in the Epsilon Project stuff of, you know, you've never seen water like this in a GTA game.
Yeah.
And, you know, we'll move on to this in a minute because we actually did get to explore the water. But I thought even on that ambient level of paddling through it, it just looked fantastic, like you were in a real bit of countryside.
Yeah, and there's a real sort of ebb and flow to the water as well, and it all contributes to the sense of place, doesn't it? I mean, there's this sense that you're actually in somewhere. You know, I know it sounds obvious, but when you're kind of descending from the helicopter, everything, you know, it's more. I mean, you can get the sense of scale in terms of the sprawl of the island, but it's more difficult to get the sense of scale, perhaps, of how big the mountains are and your place in them. But once you hit the floor there, you get a sense of, wow, these mountains really are huge. These trails really do go on forever, and wow, there's a lot of wildlife in this place.
But I mean, okay, we talked a lot about the ambience of the location. I'll hit you with some brand new specifics. What they did was like pause the game to show us, you know, what maybe has previously been hinted at but not made explicit, and that each character has got a unique set of attributes. I've got a full list of all the attributes that each character is rated on, and they did, and I was like really quickly writing down actually what Franklin's unique attributes are.
Yeah.
So we'll power through these. I think there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Is that 9? Yeah, they've got 9 unique attributes per character. The attributes are, one is called Special, which we'll explain in a minute. The other's called Stamina. The other's Shooting. There's Strength, Stealth, Flying, Driving, Mechanic Ability, and Lung Capacity. Now, you know, perhaps for a later episode we'll really pull these apart, but it's worth noting for now that Franklin's stats as we saw them, he was very high for shooting, high for strength, his stealth score was like okay, his flying score was good, which actually seems slightly at odds because I thought Trevor would be the amazing flying guy. Although
we asked Rockstar about this, and they did say that all the guys would be able to fly aircraft.
Yeah.
But it's just when you're as Franklin or as Trevor, it might be that the flying aspect of it is slightly more difficult to handle. Not Trevor, sorry, Franklin or Michael. The flying is slightly more difficult to handle. Whereas when you're Trevor, it's like walking the park for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So you know that was one of our first big gameplay revelations. From that, they wanted to show us like how you would switch character. So they showed that mechanic that was described in the Game Informer piece of there being like a D-pad, up, down, left, right, and each point on the sort of the effective D-pad is a different character. Now the bottom slot, as previously discussed on GTA 5 clock, was left clear, and we said it was for multiplayer. Now when we probed, we were told that whilst what we saw on screen was blank, what will appear in there in the final game is your like character avatar, your online avatar. That in itself could spin out into an entire episode, but I thought again that was significant. Yeah, very significant. Now I guess, is there anything more to say about this before we go into the big transition to another character?
Not really at all, other than I thought, like you say, it's probably worth mentioning that Franklin, and the same also with Trevor and Michael, which we'll talk about in a second, but Franklin as a character looked really impressive, like it moved really impressively, the model was really impressive. I think in the literature that Rockstar provided us with, it said that that the amount of textures on Franklin is more than the entire pedestrian population of GTA San Andreas. So that gives you an idea of the differences between the two. And I just thought immediately the characters felt really different to one another for a start. Yeah. They move differently, they're built differently. You know, Michael has a little paunch. Trevor's quite sort of lean and kind of sort of wiry, and Franklin's very sort of beefy and kind of muscly. So and they all moved slightly differently. They're obviously motion captured differently, presumably. And the models just look really impressive.
Yeah, Franklin looked really buff, like he was strong and muscly. He was wearing sort of quite a relatively tight like scoop neck or circle neck, black t-shirt, long sleeve t-shirt, and he looked pretty buff and strong. I think for me, like, the character models are good. They didn't like blow my entire mind, but they're much better than what we're used to.
Well, they're much better than GTA 4.
Yeah, but much better than GTA 4. But the thing really that you took away from it was that, you know, the environment, the popping's gone, the sort of dynamic rolling clouds, the water, everything in that really stole the show for me.
Okay, Dan, so that's Franklin. What happens when we switch from Franklin to Trevor?
Well, we finally got to see, you know, the much touted sort of Google Earth transition mechanic, where you get to, like, you get lifted spiritually out of your eyes and into the eyes of another character. Now, it works in, it's not like a gradual pull out where it goes like stage by stage. It uses like a sort of bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
Like, it zooms out at different levels of scale.
And with every bam, you move out like a mega amount. You don't move out gradually. You move out kind of like a small amount, then a bigger amount, then a much bigger amount. So
like, you go from like the character's body to like just above him, and then like you're considerably higher above him, and then it sort of does the reverse thing back into the new character, just like bum bum bum. You know, like you're on a big global view, and then it's like ba ba ba, like back into the life of the next guy you're transitioning to.
And there's a sort of staticky kind of vibe to the Google Earth. There was like a white noisy kind of vibe to it, I thought.
Yeah, I think it's sort of trying to affect the transition, like you're going from one state to another. But, you know, essentially, it was really stylish.
Yeah.
Gave you a nice sense of scale and felt relatively seamless. And we can talk about this later, but it felt like, to me, a clever way to mask the fact that you've got to load in a whole new set of scenery because you've skipped.
Yeah.
But it worked seamlessly, and it wasn't like you jumped out of his body and it went, loading, like cutscene. It was genuinely like slickly done.
I mean, it was a little bit of a pause between characters, wasn't there? I mean, when they're on different parts of the map, I mean, I don't know how long it took to go from one character to another up front. Probably 5, 6, 7 seconds, I guess. And obviously, if they're closer to one another, then the transition between characters is a lot quicker. It seemed to be that. It seemed to be that, you know, if it had less loading magic to do, it would transition you a lot faster. Yeah. So then we dropped into Trevor's body, literally his body, because he was lying on the beach in his pants with blood all over his chest and in a pair of boots. Yeah, he was in his pants, as we've all happened to all of us. Yeah. He looked like he had a bit of a rough night. He was covered in cuts, wearing his pants and a pair of boots. He had a really cool digital watch on, if you noticed. I thought that was a really nice touch. And again, the character model looked great. He looked kind of, you know, like the Trevor we've seen in the trailers, but kind of quite characterful. And, you know, he wakes up and he's like a sense of him bleary-eyed, like, oh man, what's happened? Yeah. And we've got all this audio. We're not going to relay it all to you now, but the speech patterns felt right. It felt, you know, it didn't feel too cheeseball. It was really good. He was surrounded by, well, basically dead dudes. Who we know to be, because we asked, they're members of the West Coast chapter of the Lost Gang. Yeah, from Lost and Damned. Yeah, and Trevor throughout GTA 5 has like an on-running feud with these people, and it's kind of a dispute over drugs and territory, and I guess that will play a part of Trevor's arc in GTA 5. Well, there's that moment in, is it the second trailer, where he says, you know, Trevor Phillips Enterprises, you know, isn't he having a massive rant at someone about, you know, you go through me, or you don't come, or whatever it is he says, which presumably is part of this kind of storyline he has, where he's having to face down members of the Lost. They looked like there were like 3 bodies there. Yeah, like about that. Like he had a bit of a ruck. I can't remember exactly. What also strikes you is, you know, away from the fact that it's a comedy cut to, you know, 1 minute I was up in the, you know, the beautiful hillsides fishing, and now I'm in a naked madman's pants. You know, I thought again it was still noticeable that the beauty of the environment was really obvious. Like you looked at the sort of the beach front he was on, and you could see sort of the sea, which you call beams or whatever they are, the sand beams were really noticeable, and the light as it was panning was like glistening off the slick top of the sand, casting different reflections. And it's a ridiculous thing, but it just adds to this sense of beauty again. And certainly, like, the sun casting in reflections throughout everything we saw was really on a different level to, like, previous games. Yeah, I mean, as the camera pans round and you see what, because to start with you're sort of facing Trevor, the camera's sort of facing Trevor as he wakes up next to this rock. You don't see any of the bodies and you don't see any of the sea, but then as he sort of walks around, the camera kind of manually is sort of turned around, and he kind of walks towards the camera and you get this first glimpse of the sea behind him, the Alamo Sea. And I just thought immediately the water again looked absolutely superb. I mean, it really did add to the feeling of being on this kind of shore, and yeah, I mean the water effects throughout were so impressive.
Yeah, so yeah, we've turned into sort of like natural, what do you call them? I don't know, we've just gone mad. We're like David Attenborough, Mad Men. But the good news was we did get out on the water, didn't we?
Yeah, we did get out on the water, and that was why I mentioned the water, is because once you're out on the water, again, you are struck by how impressive the kind of... Is water physics the right word, Dan?
Yeah, I think so. When we see Trevor like in his pants shamble his way towards a sort of...
Zodiac.
Oh, Zodiac sort of speedboat, wasn't it? Like,
yeah, it was a Zodiac, yeah.
So he gets onto that, and then he like burns out to sea, and you can see that as it's picking up speed, it's like really buffeting the waves.
Yeah.
And again, you had a sense of like, you know, if the weather was really choppy, it would be like a much more aggressive, bumpy ride, and it was quite exciting. It felt exhilarating, you know. It was like all wind in my limited hair, bumping along.
Yeah.
And as he was going along, and you could see the coast on the side, you could see people on like jet skis going about their business near the shore and stuff like that. And again, that sense of ambient detail, really fantastic.
What was nice as well is that it appeared that when boats kind of came, this only happened after at the end of the Trevor section, but it appeared that when boats kind of went past you and jet skis went past you, they affected the waves beneath you in the way that you would expect as well. So when at the end of the demo, when Trevor gets back into the Zodiac's really bumping on the waves, because it looks like, you know, but other boats have come past and people are out on. I mean, the the Alamo Sea area is a sort of holiday spot, so it's we're presuming that the people out on the jet skis and stuff here are possibly on holiday and whatever. So there's lots of them around. It's quite a sort of populated area, and that was borne out when he scubaed up, got a scuba gear on, Dan.
Yeah, well, the boat has got equipped with some scuba gear, so he pops that on and then he dives into the water, and like straight away there's a marked transition to how it feels to be, you know, in a sort of subterranean kingdom.
Yeah.
And it felt amazing, and you could sort of, you know, you could hear the breathing. It was suddenly like, you know, and it's not just like a dull flat texture. You can sort of see the waves oscillating and moving. You could see the light filtering from the sky through the surface. I think it was probably like completely OTT in the same way like J.J. Abrams does lens filters, but you know, the way the sunlight was shimmering through and sort of casting on the plant life which was shimmering. You could see shoals of fish going by. Again, it was just a really beautiful scene, quite alive. And you know, Rockstar made a big point of saying, you know, we really have mapped the ocean floor.
I was actually
sense of that.
I was actually impressed by just how much wildlife there was down there. I mean, there were absolutely tons of fish.
Yeah.
A load of sharks as well, Dan.
Yeah, there were loads of sharks. Like he swam incredibly close to some sharks. But they did say that for the purposes of the demo, they toned down their aggression, so we didn't get to see him wrestling or fighting with sharks.
There was actually a bit at the end of the demo where he sort of comes up at the end of it, and his head sort of bobbing above the water, and there are these fins kind of circling him.
Yeah.
And he would, and I think in the final game that could spell trouble, but in this demo it fortunately didn't.
And then what was quite nice is that, you know, you could see him heading towards like a destination which was like a huge industrial cargo wreck.
Yeah.
And there were those huge sort of square containers that had been tumbled to the bottom, and it was said that, you know, obviously you can go and explore them and see what's going on. And you could see other divers actually who got in on the act first and were like heading towards the same location.
Yeah.
And again, it was I don't know if it's strongly hinted as so much said that, you know, you will be able to explore, and there will definitely be rewards for exploring every last inch of this ocean. Yeah,
I mean, they were the Rockstar guys were at pains to point that out, that there will be rewards for kind of going down there and digging around and finding secret stashes of I don't know, treasure or diamonds or whatever there is down there. I mean, we talked about it on a couple of weeks ago about how there are all these shipwrecks off the coast of California, and it looks like, you know, we might have been proved, at least in part, correct. That there would be that case, and you know, although he didn't go into the wreck and look around, you definitely got the sense that there would be the opportunity to do that. And you know, we asked Rockstar whether the other two divers in the picture were some kind of like subtle sort of follow me to the treasure kind of sort of guide almost, you know. But actually, they assured us they weren't at all, and that when you go down there, you're basically on your own to explore. There's no Tomb Raider style, there's a tomb here kind of pointers. You literally go down and you have no idea necessarily what you're going to find.
So I mean, is there much more to say about that section?
I don't think so. You know, then he sort of came up at the end, got back in his boat, and as he was taking off again, it kind of was bumping on the waves, and the waves, you know, as I say, you know, the other people in and around that area created a lot more waves. But from there, we zoom to Michael.
Yeah, again, we get the transition, the sort of bomb, 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 zoom out, and then you zoom in again. Now, this was the most marked transition because you've gone from the sea and the countryside to, you know, you emerge and you see Michael in the third person. He's bang in the heart of the city at night time, so it's like rich with neon, bustling with pedestrians. You know, just real busy ambient street life. You can hear the noise. It's a completely different vibe. We see Michael and he's outside the Von Krastenberg Hotel. I don't know what real life hotel that might be. I've not had time to research what it would be. But yeah, and again you see Michael. He's a bit squatter, maybe a bit more out of shape.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of a paunch.
But he's wearing a badass suit. He looks pretty cool. And you know, you suddenly know you see him walk out onto the street, and it's so rich with life. And I think compared to like previous GTAs, what struck me so much was that like every pedestrian, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, like look really different, like quite diverse, and they were all going about their individual speech patterns, and it was sort of that bewildering sense of like, you know, of the city and almost being drowning in noise and various things going on.
I mean, they've still got that very GTA thing of, you know, people saying things to you or to other people they're walking along to as you pass them, and you get sort of snatches of conversation. And then when Michael, I mean, first of all, for anyone who's been to LA or maybe even lives in LA, they've absolutely nailed the LA vibe. You know, this sort of relatively, I know downtown is full of skyscrapers, but relatively low-rise kind of environment. But it was all set at night, so it was difficult to get a sense of perhaps the wider city. But from what we saw, they've absolutely nailed LA in terms of the look and feel of the place. And
you could see some staples from the GTA universe, like when Michael, he was sort of at a crossroads or a junction. You could see cars going back and forth. Up in, you know, across the street, you could see an Up and Atom burger sign.
Yeah.
There was like something called Tsunami.
Yeah.
There was the Vinewood India building.
Yeah, I saw that.
And then you know,
Doppler Cinema, I got a glimpse at as well. I think it was a Doppler.
And you know, and then sort of you saw Michael, you know, walk along the street. As he went on, he went to an area that was almost like, you know, the Hollywood Walk of Stars.
Yeah.
And again, you could see the stars on the street. You didn't get to read them, but you could see what was going on. And then he went past, I guess it was the famous cinema.
Yeah, it was the Chinese theatre, Grauman's Chinese theatre, or whatever the in-game equivalent of it is. I can't remember off the top of my head.
And again, you know, Rockstar haven't lost their touch for the sort of crassly satirical, because the movie poster outside the cinema was called Bitch in the Trunk.
Yeah.
Now, it's not quite as offensive as it sounds, because it was like a dog in the back of a
bitch.
Yeah, a dog bitch in the back of a car.
Yeah.
So it was, yeah, bitch in the trunk. And then, you know, outside the theatre, there was also a character called Hero, who's going to appear in the game in some of the in-game entertainment, called Impotent Rage.
Impotent Rage, yeah.
What did he look like? Can you describe him?
He had a kind of blue costume on, and he looked vaguely like Superman. Did he? Or am I remembering it wrong?
Yeah, he was like a crap Superman.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Like, well, you know, if you were called Impotent Rage, you wouldn't expect to look like.
Did I may have noted this down wrong, Dan, but in my notes I put that he also is in a cartoon series on the TV. Right, okay.
Yeah, they said he's going to appear in the sort of in-game GTA 5 entertainment, you know, universe. And in fact, on that note, also outside the cinema was like a space marine who looked a bit like Master Chief.
Yeah.
And it was in fact the space rangers we saw in the game entertainment in GTA 4.
Yeah.
And that cartoon's brilliant in GTA 4, so it was really nice to see them back.
And there was I think it was that guy in the Space Rangers outfit who was like, oh, you know, I've got a... I can't remember the exact quote, but he was going on about how he was super qualified and he had to do this crappy job standing outside the Chinese theatre in a Space Ranger suit. Dan, just spooling back a little bit, when Michael first came out of the von Krastenberg Hotel and walked along the street, he had a conversation at the end of the street with a lady, didn't he?
Yes.
And people remember how when Rockstar first announced the game, they said it's all about people who are trying to become famous and people who used to be famous, sort of washed out movie stars. And we had a brief conversation with a woman who I think would definitely be in the latter category, a bit of a washed out star. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I don't actually remember like the actual conversation, apart from thinking there's a sort of, late bloom of youth, early middle-aged star who looks like she's definitely had her day and is now wandering around the streets, maybe not in the best state.
Yeah, but it was quite a long conversation actually, so I don't know whether that's indicative of pedestrians in general, or whether there'll be like pedestrians here and there that are quote unquote more important.
Yeah, like sort of celebrity pedestrians almost.
Yeah,
that was a good long piece of conversation, wasn't it?
Yeah.
In fact, from there as well, I forgot to mention that Michael walks past a tour bus for the celebrity homes tour they do.
Oh yeah, that's
Vinewood.
right. Yeah.
And again, that was like a completely unique looking vehicle that I wonder if you steal it, you enter a unique side mission of taking people on stars of
That's a good shout, yeah.
I don't know that, but as a vehicle, it definitely was unique in feel, and clearly you were able to steal it and do stuff with it.
You're also able to just sit on there and take the tour of Los Santos as well. So you don't just have to steal it. You can actually. They did say that it would take you around Los Santos and you get a bit of a tour of the city as well, sort of doubling up, I guess, as a tour guide to the place.
Now this was fantastic. When we go back to the Space Ranger and we could see him posing, and naturally he went, look at this idiotic Space Ranger. Wouldn't it be great if there was some way to capture this moment? Well, as it turns out, and as speculated and predicted absolutely correctly on GTA 5 o'clock weeks ago, your smartphone acts as a camera.
Yes.
So we saw Michael take out his phone. Now, in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, there was like the shape of what was essentially an iPhone.
Yeah, it looked pretty much like an iPhone.
Down to the fact that it had like 9. Was it 9?
Yes, it was 9. Yeah.
9 square apps on the front of it. Now, I was desperately trying to write down what they all were. Certainly, the top row. It was very much like Apple. It seemed like there was a messaging one, there was a calendar one,
well, the calendar app looked pretty much exactly the same as. If you can imagine what the calendar app on your iPhone looks like, this looks like that.
It was uncannily the same.
Yeah.
And again, we'll talk on this later at depth. Rockstar said you'll be able to access a special version of a social network from within your phone.
Yeah.
This is, we've got some facts on that, and there's going to be a lot of speculation about that. It might be for a later show. But what we did see is, there we go.
I've written some of it down for you here, Dan, to make it easier.
Yeah, Tim's written some down. We've got the camera. You could go on the internet. You could access your contacts, which is exactly like your iPhone. And each character will have a unique set of contacts and sort of friends who they know. So that was quite interesting. Social media we just talked about. Tim's also mentioned here that you can use it to go back and replay missions.
Yeah, I mean they didn't really go. They didn't really go into any of these options in any particular detail. The camera was the only one we saw actually in action, because I don't think Michael even received a phone call, did he? On this phone.
No, we didn't see that.
So it was we just saw the camera in action. But yeah, they did say that you could go back and replay missions using the phones. And we mentioned the calendar. I think we could probably speculate, and we'll probably talk about this later on down the line. But the calendar will be used presumably to remind you when, perhaps you put the date of heists in there, or the dates of things that you're like preparation for the heist or whatever, that sort of stuff. That's an easy assumption to make. And then they said, we asked what the others were, and they said there's some other things that we aren't ready to talk about yet. Yeah,
no, the camera itself operated pretty much as you'd expect a camera to operate in video games, where you had like a rudimentary zoom in and zoom out function. I think it was on the sticks. X was take a photo. So you took a photo of the dude, and they did say you could upload that to your social network
and the social club as well,
and to the social club.
Yeah.
So,
which is again something we speculated about weeks ago when we saw that photo of the vehicle next to the wind farm in a sort of Instagram style. Now we don't know whether that screenshot in particular is evidence of this, but we were definitely pretty convinced that this would happen, and it's ended up being
to
the
reduce
case.
any ambiguity, we were right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, again, you're struck by the detail. He moves on from there. He's walking down the street, and then you look on your in the bottom left where we previously talked about there being an altimeter. Now it was like a classic GTA radar, but as I remember, it wasn't just like purely certainly not when you're driving. It's not a classic top-down. It's a sort of quasi 3D radar, and on it there was a question mark. Now, the question mark was where we were heading towards, and this is where it activated. I suppose what was like the emergent or random missions that Rockstar have talked about, and we bumped into a sort of, I guess she was a sort of Lindsay Lohan-alike.
Yeah, sort of up and coming. Well, probably a bit more less drugged up and in a state than Lindsay Lohan, but sort of up and coming actress.
Yeah, and as I remember, she was called Lacey Jonas.
Yeah, that sounds right. That's what I've got written down as well.
And you had to I don't know, was she lost and you had to take her to a different side of town?
No. She was holed out in an alleyway because the paparazzi had hunted her down and were trying to take her photograph. So as Michael sort of approached this alleyway, there were two paps kind of on either corner of the alleyway, with both with long lens cameras looking down the alleyway. And when you first get to the mouth of the alleyway, you can't actually see her because she's hiding behind. I didn't actually take note of the car, and I should have done, but it looked like
the car you go into is a Serrano.
Yeah, but she was hiding behind some sort of 4x4 style SUV.
I didn't know,
which I forgot to take note of. But yeah, sorry, Dan. So you pick up the mission, and then what happens?
Well, basically, then you've got to escape the paps. So you're driving along, and they're behind you. Now, to me, it didn't look like an especially aggressive pursuit scene. It was more like follow your way to where she wants to be dropped off,
which was her house.
Her house in Vinewood Hills. But the thing that was nice again is as you're driving her along, and you get again, it looks the city looks busy, the traffic's great. It was similar to what you've seen in GTA 4 in terms of the driving, but maybe looked a bit heavier, a bit more realistic.
Yeah, I guess it's difficult for us to speculate on how it feels, because like one of the first questions I'm sure people out there will have was how does the shooting feel? How does the driving feel compared to GTA 4? Now, just to underline, we can't really tell you at this stage because it was an eyes-on only thing. But I mean, to look at, I agree. It looked heavier, and it looked slightly smoother. And was it my imagination, or did it look faster than GTA 4?
Maybe it's just so hard to say, isn't it, without actually playing it? But it just looked better,
Yeah.
As we said, the radar moves into a sort of quasi 3D, almost like you'd expect of like a nice TomTom device or something, and it just felt really slick. And as you're going along, she's constantly talking to you, like during the mission. So she'll say like, "Oh, thanks for helping me out. This is really great. Oh, great." And she'll go, "Oh, do I look good today? Yeah, I do look good, don't I?" And all this sort of stuff. And then she'd suddenly go, "Oh, I don't know. I'm not there." And she goes, "What? You should be privileged, You don't know who I am?" And he said, "No." And she goes, "Oh, well, I'm Lacey Jonas." And he's like, I don't know. And she goes, "Well, you should know because I test really high in your demographic."
Yeah.
And it was full of that sort of, well-observed Rockstar. And it was, without me laughing so hard I fell off a chair or anything, it was just nicely observed ambient chatter.
Yeah. And so the car chase went on for, I don't know, a minute
a minute or so. Yeah, definitely.
Not too long. And then they wound their way up into Vinewood Hills, which is like the foothills, as the name suggests, the foothills of the mountain on which the Vinewood sign is erected. And they got to a house. Yeah,
and her house is like, and as you move out of the sort of the core of what's like sort of Hollywood and the Sunset Strip, and it all looks absolutely accurate and bang on. As you wind up to the hills, it is like real LA. You do get a sense of breaking out of the sprawl and the density, and You know, from going from like the grid system of the streets, you go to these windy organic hillside, and it just felt a lot more peaceful, you know. And then you get up to her house, and she's got obviously a beautiful mansion on the hillside, and you know, he stops and lets her out, and through his troubles, he gets given $150.
Right, yeah, that's right. One thing I did notice was that when he got given $150, they had the old GTA font in the top right corner, you know, which is quite a nice little touch, because everything else is very modern and kind of you know, slick and stuff, but it was a nice little throwback. It was a tiny thing, but it's just, you know, it was a nice little addition, I thought.
And then, you know, as we were talking about various different things with the Rockstar reps, they were just panning the camera around Michael stood outside her house, and again, it was just really peaceful, really tranquil. Even, it was, you know, the ambient details go to the level of, you could see almost like little flies buzzing around him.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
And that was amazing. Like, it just, you know, you had a sense of the night. Like, it took you to being what it's like to be there on like a balmy evening, but chilly enough to wear a light jacket. You know, just, I don't know, it was really evocative for me, and I got a sense of a lot of this, you know, from then.
Yeah, some of that sort of incidental detail is really what builds a much more convincing and bigger picture of the world, I think. It's like, you know, we kept going earlier on in the show, we kept going on about the water effects, but they really did build this sort of sense of being there, you know, just through that, and like the little insects and stuff give a sense of being in a very warm city at that time of the year. And I thought as well, I noticed that as well, and thought it was really good.
So I mean, that's all the character incidentals we saw. Let's move on to the mission we saw.
Okay, Dan, so the mission, it was a heist of sorts, but it wasn't one of the heists.
Yeah, I mean, the game's got a series of core heists. This again might span into another episode, but the heists are like complex and they require a lot of planning. What we saw, and in fact, there's a mission called Blitz Play.
Yeah. And
it says it's like a one-of-a-kind mission that shares some structural elements with the game's major heists, including earlier prep missions. It says, however, Blitz Play only requires the 3 lead characters, no additional crew, and doesn't come with a bigger haul of the major heists. And in fact, like, Blitz Play is a mission almost conceived entirely by Michael, and we found out a bit more about Michael's character in terms of him being essentially really sad despite having everything. And he sits at home drinking whiskey, watching, like he says, old Vinewood action movies. So I guess he's watching Vinewood's equivalent of like 80s Schwarzenegger flicks and all that sort of thing. And he's kind of cooked up this mission based on almost like an action fantasy of his, really. Yeah,
I mean, it's quite a clever device, really, that, because it allows Rockstar to beg, steal and borrow classic movie action heists from the real world and incorporate them into the game, and you know, based around the fact that Michael loves watching these, you know, the GTA equivalents of Heat and of Die Hard and of that sort of thing, you know. And because this mission this Blitz Play mission we're about to describe has you know, quite a few things in common with Heat, which is another sort of classic, has another classic heist. It was another classic heist movie, and presumably that's because Michael has watched the GTA 5 equivalent of Heat at some stage.
So you see all 3 characters, meeting up to discuss what's going to go down. The banter is similar to as we've seen in the trailers, where, you know, in fact, the thing that struck me probably was that Trevor he's not a complete madman. Like, he's actually quite funny.
Yeah.
Like, and you know, he's not just there going "me kill now" or anything. You know, he is like chatting away and making a thing of it. You can tell that Franklin's more unsure of himself. And you know, Michael's the guy they look to for like the direction and steerage, really. You know, I felt like that, and I'm not going to quote individual lines, but that was definitely the vibe of it. And you know, Michael explains then, you know, what they're going to do, and I think what they're planning to do is to take down a security truck, like an armoured security truck, and their plan to do so is to like create a obstruction on the road which prevents it from
with the dump truck,
with the dump truck, prevents it from going anywhere. And then, like, ramming it with the tow truck,
which is out of Heat, which is why I mentioned Heat. You know, so it's that's, you know, that's why I think that, you know, we speculated in previous weeks that it'll have die-hard style Nakatomi Plaza style thing. I really don't think that's out of the question now, given that how closely this borrows elements from real-world action films.
Yeah, no, exactly. It could just be that one of Michael's favourite films is like, perish aggressively or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Die Hard, or,
Right, yeah.
something like that. You just don't know. But I mean, we see this scene described. They're talking to each other, and then Michael brings out like a little case with masks, and there's a little joke about, "Oh, you're not going to make us wear something stupid, are you?" And out of the case pops is like a skeleton mask.
Yeah.
Like a Jason
Voorhees kind of hockey mask.
Like a hockey mask, yeah. And then there's like a stupid monkey mask.
Yeah. Didn't the monkey have a cigar or something? Or was a cigar actually being smoked? I just saw like a little cigar kind of poking
I can't
out.
remember. They're basically completely stupid
Yeah.
masks, and you pop them on. It's just quite funny. You also see the trucks they're about to use, and the dumper trucks and stuff. They've all got like classic Rockstar brand names on them, and like stupid, needless but quite funny puerile jokes. Like there was the Butt Lovers truck.
Butt Lovers truck, yeah.
There was the Little Pricks dumper.
Yeah, I got that as well. And the security van was Group 6.
Yeah, like Gruppe 6.
Gruppe 6, yeah. Which I think was in previous. Is another GTA brand, isn't it?
So you see basically Michael pull out in the Little Pricks dumper onto the street.
Yeah.
And he's driving out, wending his way to the radar location you have to be at. Now, as you're driving, he's bantering away. He's talking to, I think it's Trevor, who's positioned up on high.
Yeah.
And the entire mission has got a very dynamic cinematic feel to it. Like, you'd be chatting away, and suddenly the camera will cut to like Trevor's eye view, and Trevor will be there with the binoculars, looking down, scoping out the scene, explaining to you what's going to happen. It's got real movie cut feel to it. I think.
Yeah, and also the score as well kicks in. So
yeah.
Even I didn't actually pay attention, Dan, and I really should have done. But was music playing on the radio station while he was in the dump truck, or was it just the score the whole way through? It was
kind of at this moment. It was kind of hard to tell whether it was dynamic music that the game was forcing onto you, or whether it was just music playing on the radio that felt sympathetic.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't. It definitely was the score playing throughout most of this mission. But I just don't know whether it's. I forgot to take note of whether it changes from the score to a radio station.
Yeah, I'm afraid I can listen to that back on the audio I've got, but I can't tell you right now.
One thing you should know: people who've watched the beginning of The Dark Knight and remember the music there, the Hans Zimmer music, where they're kind of raiding the bank, and it's like that doon 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 doon. That kind of. That's what this music sounded like. I thought it sounded like the start of The Dark Knight.
So I mean, eventually they get to the point where you put the which truck is it? You put the dumper truck in the way to block the security vehicle. Now, when that's done, the way the actual impact moment of the scene plays out, uses a lot of series of dynamic camera cuts. So you go from the camera is dynamic as the van advances, the security van advances. Then it flips into the first person as Franklin drives in with the other truck to ram it.
Yes, yeah.
So you straight into the first person, and then at the point of impact, the camera moves outside back into the third person, but in slow motion. So the entire scene is played out very dynamically and cinematically.
Yeah.
And I think it creates a really nice impact.
And do you think were they changing between? Were they manually changing between characters, or was that part of the build-up to the mission at that stage?
It felt like at that stage the game was automatically
Switching
forcing
between.
you to these camera points just to make it more dramatic and exciting. And it worked. I thought it was really effective.
Okay, so they ram the security van. It spills open and crashes.
Yeah.
The back doors come open. Then what happens?
Well, there's a load of dudes who are in the van, like security
I think it's
dudes.
2 of them.
Yeah, who roll out on the floor, all like they've had it. And then what is it? They basically it all ends up in a ginormous firefight. Like, how do they get picked up then?
Well, what happened was that the dudes came out the back of the security van, and one of them said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "It's too late. We've already sounded the alarm." So they've obviously got some sort of internal button they've pressed in the van, and then desperately the lads, I don't remember if it was Michael, Trevor, or well, it wasn't Trevor, Michael or Franklin grabbed the security bonds, I think it is, they steal from this van. They grab the security bonds, and it's at that point that you start hearing the sirens kind of going off in the background.
Yeah, no, pretty soon, like you see it in the top right corner, you've got 4 out of 5 wanted stars, and the sort of police stroke SWAT who come for you, they're not holding back.
No,
as in there's an awful lot of them, and like you see, again, I'm not sure if it was Michael or not, but he pulls out his machine gun, and again I noted the detail of the gun, where you've got like a clip of 30 with a total like ammunition count of 580.
Right.
And then you're into like what was quite classic combat if you've seen what happens in 4-Leaf Clover, etc. But again, tighter, lots of use of cover. You see Michael run along, he sort of snaps to like a piece of scenery, and he's there and he's sort of leaning above and shooting,
like a barricade
and blasting
kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and as he goes up to it, he does do a dynamic roll.
Yeah,
like you can see him roll into the cover. So again, it looked like it was following a lot of what people would expect from shooting right now.
What did you make of the shooting? I mean, it's difficult to say without going hands on, but did it look like it had improved on GTA 4? Do you think, or?
Yeah, I mean, GTA 4 made big leaps, and I think that's what made 4-Leaf Clover so much fun to play. Is that it felt like you were wielding a machine gun, it felt like you were blowing things up. It just looked like another level up from that, without being a completely different game. Rockstar have given us some facts on it. And they say this is how they describe it. They say now you can fluidly run and gun from the hip while still maintaining complete control of the aiming reticule. There's something called a combat jog that allows you to move at high speeds with your weapon out without it being actually raised. And it says the camera pulls back when you're zoomed in over the shoulder to open up your field of vision, which again you could notice, but it wasn't like too in your way. And then there's the combat roll that we talked about. It allows you to roll between cover. It says in terms of the reticule, there's been a few improvements. The reticule switches from white to red to identify enemies as opposed to friendlies, which is a small touch but really useful. And then a tiny X flashes over the reticule when an enemy is killed to save you like unloading loads of ammo into a dead body, essentially. And then you can switch your targeting between free aim, soft lock, and hard lock.
Yeah.
And it did seem, the combat was. It didn't seem overly challenging. He was like really like locking onto the dudes, and it seemed to me like the environments were more explosive and destructive. Yeah,
one nice thing I saw, which I thought I'd mention, was that Michael, I think it was, machine gunned a police car, and as is the way in games and films, a car exploded after a couple of gunshots, and this thing, this police car turned into a ball of flames, and there was one policeman nearby, and there was another caught in the car when it exploded, and he staggered out of the car, and he was on fire, and it was only a small moment because the guy who was demoing it to us sort of turned away from it, but I thought it was lovely because he staggered out of the car and he was on fire and he was going and sort of rolling around on the floor on fire. How you'd expect someone on fire to behave, and I thought it was a really good piece of incidental detail.
So basically you're pinned down in this alleyway, like fending off loads of incoming police and SWAT, that kind of thing. And you can swap characters like middle of the battle to get a different perspective and to help out, where Trevor's up above, I believe, and he can like snipe with his sniper rifle. And again, we saw that in action, and it was again classic what you'd expect. Like you get the sniper sight on screen, you were zooming in. It was a bit more wobbly because you're sniping, and I guess your sniper skill will play part of it. And he was just popping off strategically placed foes that were harder for the guy on the ground to get to. Something I thought was interesting was that as you were shooting your machine gun, you could see on your radar, every time you went like blap, 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 blap with the gun, there was a cone surrounding your character's icon that would grow and retract subject to the volume you were creating.
Oh, right.
So
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, it was like, I guess a way to detect how noisy you're being. And, the police would be able to detect your presence, I think, if their sort of sphere of awareness overlapped with your noise. So if you're doing something really, really noisy, you're obviously going to give yourself away, but it made it nice and explicit in terms of the radar.
So presumably that ties into the fact that earlier on you were talking about the character, skills and stuff, and one of them was stealth. So I assume that ties into stealth somehow. Yeah,
I guess a guy who's really handy with weapons or carries certain weapons could get through certain sections without too much heat.
Yeah.
Now we suddenly see a chopper pull into the scene, and it's like hitting you with a big spotlight, and everything's looking pretty bad for you because you're pinned down, you're being blown up. And again, you cut back to Trevor, and I think you can choose at certain points in a mission, it will automatically cut you to another character, and I guess this might be one of them. At other points, you can just choose to be someone else. But you cut back up to the top viewpoint, and Trevor can see this chopper's come in, and obviously has got to deal with it. So he pops out an RPG, and like straight away, Trevor's firing out enormous
rockets.
Yeah, RPG rockets, and he takes it out.
Yeah,
and eventually. And all the time this is happening, like Tim said, you've got this sort of Hans Zimmer-esque, like man out, bam, 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 like sort of score going. It's really intense, like really keeps you on the edge. But as the volume of bad guys sort of thins out, the music just just breaks down.
I think once you've cleared the bad guys, I think the soundtrack obviously will fade out, I guess, or will fade down.
Yeah,
anyway.
When I say bad guys, you've just robbed a security truck.
Well, yeah, I mean the good guys, obviously.
Let's not confuse that.
Yeah,
but yeah, and it also then when you escape, and we were told a little bit more about the wanted system, where basically the police will have like a search cone radius, and even if you are on wanted stars, as long as you evade the search radius, for example, you might go have a brilliant hiding spot underneath a bridge or something. As long as you stay down there, you'll be safe. Like you won't be seen.
Yeah.
So I thought that was quite nice.
Yeah.
And eventually he drives their vehicle away. Is it? He drives the dumper truck away.
Yeah.
And to like dispose of the evidence, he rolls a grenade along the floor underneath the truck. And then, the truck just blows up and starts flaming and smoking.
He drives the dump truck to the location of their getaway vehicle, which Rockstar said you could place anywhere you wanted.
Yes.
In this case, he placed it underneath the bridge. Well, it's actually across. It was actually a sort of like a spaghetti junction almost, wasn't it? It was like there were a couple of flyovers, passing one another, and he'd parked it under there. And after he'd blown up the dump truck, he got in the car, and I think it was a Cheval. I noted down that it was a Cheval. Got in there and escaped in that. But they did say that you could place that car anywhere you wanted to, and actually in your prep work for the missions, there was a good deal of freedom in terms of how exactly you wanted to structure it. Even down to like what masks you wear and what suits you kind of put on.
Now that kind of wrapped up the mission, didn't it?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to add was that people might be wondering where the mission took place, and it was down. Dan, I can't remember which trailer it was. There was one trailer where there was a guy running away from a helicopter through like between two sets of warehouses. I'm not sure if that was the second trailer, but people out there will correct me, whichever one it was. But it looked like it was taking place in that location because there were a lot of warehouses around this area. I asked Rockstar whether it looked like it was down by the docks, to be honest, but I asked Rockstar whether it was down by the docks, and they said it wasn't. But in the background I could see the bridge that we've talked about in one of the previous episodes of GTA 5 o'clock, where it's kind of like a sort of semicircle built on top of the bridge, and that's what the bridge looks like. And if for those out there who want to go and research it, it's the bridge, unfortunately, where film director Tony Scott jumped off of last year. But that will give you an idea of the bridge, and that bridge, I think I'm right in saying, is down by the docks in real LA, which is why I assumed this had taken place down by the docks. Rockstar said it didn't, but if it wasn't down by the docks, it was pretty close to it.
Now, on the back of this, there were a number of gameplay revelations.
Yeah.
Now, what we saw, as we say, wasn't a real heist, but like a mini heist. We do know more about the main heists. I think we can take through some of the details of what we've got. And it says, now, instead of the game being linear progression to one big finale, GTA's narrative is now formed around the concept of heists, which are like big, multi-part missions that require proper planning and execution, but they come with by far and away the biggest payoff in terms of cash. Now it says major heists are sprinkled throughout the narrative. There's like a series of action-packed peaks. They sort of focus the narrative and create key hot points. And it says allows players to jump into the biggest, most epic missions much earlier in the game. So I think you can sort of choose which heist you're going to go for. Then a whole set of missions and approaches spring up around how you're going to do it. Now I'll break through how heist works. Basically, Rockstar have said it. So essentially, there's a planning and sort of preparation stage, which is pre-mission, where you'll be acquiring the appropriate weapons, vehicles, equipment, and all the stuff you need to pull off the heist. And I guess that spins off into having to go to certain areas, having to perform certain tasks, maybe to befriend certain people.
Yeah.
And maybe different characters' contacts have got abilities to link you up with different equipment and that kind of stuff. Then you choose your plan of attack. Now this is like, you can either choose to go in by stealth or you can go by brute force. And this will actually change the way the mission plays out when you finally attempt to. And we're told that all of this stuff is done. You'll have, we weren't shown it, you'll almost have like a whiteboard and a separate section of the game where you can see what you've chosen to do and how you're going to do it. I guess like classic criminals do in their hideout. You'll have like the pinboard, the post-its.
Yeah.
They did use the word post-its, so maybe that's what they'll do, you know.
A literal whiteboard as well, is what they said. You know,
Right,
a literal whiteboard in a hideout somewhere where you plan out with post-its and presumably photographs and, you know, intel and that sort of stuff. Exactly how you're going to approach the heist.
Now this was fascinating and something we've not heard about before. You choose a crew. So it's not just the three of you going in on a mission. So certain jobs require more than just the three characters. You may now need drivers, gunmen, or skilled technicians. Well, I guess that could be people like lockpicks or people who've got hacking skills. You know, this kind of thing. And it says the higher the skill level of a crew member, the bigger the cut they require. So essentially, you know, you pay for what you get. So if you pay for the cheapest getaway driver, he might be an absolute klutz.
Yeah.
But if you want Ryan Gosling,
Yeah.
you've got to fork out the big bucks.
Yeah.
Now, if you hire good crew members and they survive the heist, they get carried through with you to the next mission, and their skills would be suitably boosted.
I wonder how they decide who survives and who doesn't, because they're not going to be controlled by you.
I guess there's an element of, there might be bits where either you've got to protect them with sniper fire, or you've got to take over the driving, or, you know, there's got to be something where there's an element of your skill or your planning will affect. And this might be something similar to BioWare did in Mass Effect 2, where at the end of the game there's the aptly titled suicide mission, where certain things determined that people would die based on your level of planning. So if you went in a bit half-assed, certain characters were going to die, but it was also a function of decisions you made. So like if you made a bad decision mid-mission to deploy someone in the wrong area where they weren't skilled, it might result in their death. So there could be like a little matrix of correct outcomes depending on how you set things up. Now, when you've got all your crew together, at the end of it, you'll get like a whopper payout that'll be split between the crew, and then you'll get the end slate that tallies your total cash haul, each surviving member's cut, and any profit you manage to win. So I like the idea of planning a mission for ages and then earning absolutely nothing out of it. You know,
I guess it adds an element of strategy to it, because, you know, do you go for the best people but have to pay them more? Do you go for someone cheaper and have to pay them less but risk that they might cock up the mission? What interested me was that this idea that you can attack a target by stealth or by brute force. I mean, I wonder what. I mean, we saw the brute force in all its glory when we saw the game, which is shooting lots of police officers and taking down a helicopter with an RPG. But I wonder how the stealth would work. I mean, we weren't shown it and we weren't really told about it, but I'm just interested.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to spin too much on it because it might be a later episode.
Yeah.
But for example, let's say you were infiltrating a huge industrial plaza or high-tech plaza. Say you paid for an expensive hacker. You might want almost like a ninja-style approach unit who were going to go in, stealthily circumvent the guards by knocking them out with tranks, getting your key tech guy into a position where he can disable all the alarms. So you know, you would make things easier by approaching it a certain way.
That's very Die Hard.
Yeah, exactly like Die Hard. So you know, that's it. You want, you know, hey, it'd be good to have a skills guy who speaks like 10 different languages or something. You know, that kind of thing. You know, like fun stuff like that. I'll probably save a lot of speculation on that for a later episode. I wanted to pick up on the fact that under the radar in the bottom left there was a bar which had 3 different colours and strands. The core part of the bar is about 70% of its total length, and I believe that's your health. Now, I understand that if you get taken out or shot, the bar will recover to 50% of its full value on its own, but to get it back up to 100%, you've got to like take med kits or, you know, take an item to get it back to the top. Now, I can't remember what the middle part of the bar was.
Body armour.
Body armour.
The blue one was body armour,
Now, the final part of the bar is the intriguing bit. It's called your special bar. Each of the characters has a unique special ability, which is unique to their skills. Now we'll go through these one by one. Now Michael has the ability to slow down time during the fight, which basically means Michael can access bullet time.
Yeah.
So he is Max Payne.
Yeah.
Well, he's not literally Max Payne, or is he?
Or is he? That might be a major story twist.
Yeah, that would be quite amazing if he was actually Max Payne. But yeah, he can slow down time. Now, Franklin has the ability to slow down time while driving.
Yeah.
So I guess if you're like, in an absolutely balls to the wall escape and you're trying to do a massive 90-degree bend, perhaps it allows you to take that bend tighter than anyone else, or sort of weave between traffic while skidding in slow-mo.
Might allow you to zip between two trucks, in a very Hollywood style, wouldn't it? As the trucks kind of come together.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That sort of stuff.
They can orchestrate all sorts of cool stuff around that. Now, in Trevor, classically, his special ability is like a double damage thing. So if he fires an RPG, it does like mega melee damage, and he receives less damage. He's also got a unique melee attack as well, so he must enter a kind of frenzy mode, I guess, where, as we discussed again on the show, he's going to be your rampage character.
Yeah.
And he'll go out and cause massive trouble.
And none of those characters share each other's specials at all, at any point throughout the game?
No. Whilst you can level up the 9 attributes we talked about by, for example, well, we're going to build that into another conversation now, but if you do a lot of shooting, your shooting will get better. There's also another way to improve your shooting that we'll move on to in our modifications section. But each character's special abilities is unique. They should be strategically deployed during missions to get the best out of them. And as we say, they're not interchangeable.
What, Dan, did they say about how often you can use that special ability? Because presumably you can't use it as much as you want.
No, it's like a bar, isn't it? I guess in a way, like a muscle. Like the more you use it, the better you get at it.
Yeah.
Like all the stats in the game. But essentially, it's got a finite use. So when you activate it, the bar decreases. We don't know exact durations, but you might get like 30 seconds of bullet time.
And then it gradually refills, doesn't it?
We didn't see it in action, and it's something Rockstar are going to show down the line. Now, we talked about building your attributes up by, repetition and rote, and do something. The more you do something, the better you get. This was also revealed is that you can buy your way to that using modifications.
Yes. So you can modify vehicles. You can modify cars.
Yeah.
Pay and sprays now double up as sort of mod shops, don't they? Weapons you can add scopes to, laser sights, all that kind of stuff. Dan, do you want to chat a little bit more about that?
I do, because I can't find my section in the notes where I've got explicit details.
Yeah, I'll show you where it is. Just talk amongst yourselves there, listeners, while we just find it. Next page, Dan.
There she blows. Yeah, extensive customization. Okay, now, your character has got extensive customization. We talked about you can get tattoos.
Yeah.
You can get different haircuts.
Actually, just on tattoos, when during Michael's section, when he was wandering up towards the Chinese theatre, where we said that the Space Ranger was, on the way was a tattoo shop, and he could have popped in there and got a tattoo if he wanted to.
I did write down the name of it, but I'll save that for another show. Haircuts, you can change your clothing, obviously. Now, vehicle customization, this is something we've talked about previously. Once again, it's absolutely correct, it's in there. You can get basic things like paint jobs, you can get new wheels, you can get window tints, new grills, new spoilers. Now you can make big performance upgrades to your suspension, to the engine, to the brakes, and it really changes the way the car feels and handles, and presumably its armour characteristics. Again, it's really exciting, because if you can find a super cool, rare sports vehicle and pimp it up to the max, that's like your crown jewel when you're planning heists. You can imagine that. If you recruit like an amazing escape driver and give him this ultimate car, it's going to make it a hell of a lot easier to do this really hard stuff. Now, weapons are similar. I guess you'll be able to have a cache of weapons you can take from mission to mission. Where, weapons, you can add silencers, you can add scopes, extended magazines, there's laser sights, and even more.
Yeah.
Now, Rockstar have talked about, this finally starting to see it in fruition. They said there's going to be a lot of ways to spend your money. You're going to be spending money to earn money, because your ability to scope big in the heists will be related to your amazing cache of weapons, vehicles, prep, all that stuff.
Do you think it will be possible to you know, maybe you pimp up that car to its max amount, and maybe you use it for a heist as the ultimate getaway vehicle, or maybe if you're short on cash, you could sell it.
Yeah, possibly so. I mean, I guess there'd be guys who could, you know, you may need, let's say, weapons as opposed to an amazing car, so perhaps there'll be a second-hand market as such. Now, something that they hadn't previously confirmed, or in fact almost felt like they shied away from, but they have now confirmed in terms of spending money, is that you can buy businesses and buy property. They didn't expand on this particularly, but when we pressed on it, we were told that, and I said, you know, is the idea that you buy a business and that business ticks over in the background, giving you a payout of money at certain time allotments? And basically the nod was, yes, that's the idea. So, you know, you will be almost, like we said before, an economy, and you'll invest in it and you'll get paybacks from it.
So what sort of things did they say you could buy, Dan? Do you remember?
No.
I think it was garages, marinas, nightclub. Like, they gave a specific example of Franklin, that he might be the type of guy that wants to go and buy a nightclub.
You'd buy character-specific properties, wouldn't you?
Yeah. I did ask about whether the properties might be used as kind of like for scoping out potential heists and all that sort of stuff, and the answer really appeared to be negative. So I assume these properties are literally just for making money.
Yeah. All right. I think Tim, there's more we can say.
Yeah.
Loads more we can say. We're going to say it for other days, and we're going to have lots more detail, lots more conversation snippets, lots more, you know, stuff in the context of what we discussed up to this point. You can also read. You've written about it for CVG, haven't you?
Yes. This video you're listening to now should be embedded in the article that I write for CVG, which will attempt to go over some of the other stuff perhaps that we haven't talked about so much on the show today, so that they don't feel exactly the same. Please do have a read of that article. If you've got any questions or want to raise any comments, then do so in the comments, or you can do it on our YouTube page below this video. Like Dan says, over the coming weeks we'll be taking that 30-35 minute demo and really pulling it apart down to microscopic detail. There's so much more we want to talk to you guys about the mission, about the kind of like ambient things we saw, the city, the wildlife, the country, how the camera might work, how the multiplayer might work. We've got so much more to come. So, you know, please do keep in touch with us. Do keep in touch with our Twitter page, Dan. I
just wanted to, before we left, just Tim, broadly, you know, what did you think of GTA 5?
Yeah, that's a good one. I was going to ask you exactly the same question,
that's
actually.
Good. Yeah.
Broadly, I thought it was really, really impressive. It was sometimes it's difficult to tell exactly what a game is like based on 30-35 minutes of hands-off kind of demo, because, you know, you don't get necessarily an actual feel for how the shooting is, the feel for how the driving is, but you could certainly from the demo get a sense of how the world was and how it behaved and how it might behave once you're in it. And I think that the biggest compliment I can pay the game is that I came away from it thinking I really, really wanted to explore that world. I thought that the choice of fronting it with a jump out of a helicopter down to the kind of countryside was perfect, because it was not, you know, it was GTA, but a GTA not about the shooting, not about the like stealing cars, not about the sort of grand traditions, I guess, of the sort of violence and that sort of stuff. It was about just experiencing the beauty of this world. I thought it was a really good, a really great start. And actually, I you know, although I thought the mini heist, or whatever we want to call it, the side mission blitz play was really good, the bit that appealed to me most was like getting down where Franklin kind of parachuted into and just having a mooch around. So, I mean, I thought it was really impressive. What I came away with was a real sense that technically they've pushed this generation of consoles literally as far as it can go. You know, I mean, I'm not necessarily saying it's like visually the most beautiful game I've ever seen in my life, because that would be a lie. I think it's a really nice looking game. In fact, a very nice looking game. But I think, given the scale of what they're trying to do here, the level of fidelity they've got in that world really is outstanding. So, yeah, I mean, overall, I was really, really impressed. Given, I mean, what we saw, difficult to judge based on zipping between three characters, all of which just wandered around their environment a little bit, and then one mission. But even despite that, I thought it was great.
I think exactly like you say, I agree with a lot of your points. The thing for me broadly is always with GTA games is that it's an expectations game, and Rockstar's so brilliant at hype and tease and build up that you almost in your mind get an unrealistic expectation of how that game will be. You know, you think about it like GTA 4 the myth versus GTA 4 the reality, and like you know, in a way it's almost like, you know, cut me and I bleed. You can sort of see the real game and the framework and its limitations, but in this controlled slice, you know, the thing that shone above anything is, like you say, is this technical confidence. And it's not graphics beyond the realms of believability. Maybe not even as good as, let's say, the highest heights of Uncharted 2 or Uncharted 3. It's like, you know, on a level comparable to that in terms of, let's say, the water effects or the lighting. Maybe not quite as good, but in the context of this enormous scale, this sense of freedom and liberation, and like, you know, actual beauty, like you say, like Rockstar understand that in life, going to a hilltop as the sun is setting, you listen to the right music, is a genuinely beautiful moment, and they capture that stuff incredibly well. Like in terms of the actual gameplay features and mechanics, there's nothing we've seen or heard that's from a world we couldn't imagine. But it's all executed with confidence, it's exciting, and I think it's all about how these elements will interact. And I think the big, you know, rabbit in the hat is going to be how it all links to social media and how it all links to online and multiplayer.
So do you think that's because they've sort of hinted that the game has elements that you won't have seen anywhere else before? So you think that's the side of it that they're talking about here?
Yeah, I think that's the big sort of soprendo reveal yet to come. But you know, what we've seen is like a really confident proof of progress. The world looks beautiful, like, you know, the mechanics look solid and great. The world's rich with detail. You just feel like, the thing for me was, I just wanted to take the pad and go, do you know what, I just want to explore. I want to get in that car, I want to drive over that hill, I want to find that jump, I want to swim under the ocean, I want to chat to that guy, I want to hear some ambient conversations, I want to go inside that burger house. You just want to get your drink in the world, you know, and it just felt so huge and so rich. I mean, Rockstar said to us, you know, this is the dwarfing scale of it. At Rockstar North alone, they've got like something like 300 to 400 people right making this game right now, between their core staff and their sort of freelance staff. Plus, they've got the San Diego studio working on it. So there's like 500 people working on this game.
I think it was more than that. More than just those studios. I think they said that there was London were doing a little bit of work on it, and you know,
unbelievable scale of project. You know, and you can't overstate like how big this game is. And you know, whilst when you see it, it's from a world you can understand and appreciate. I thought it was genuinely really impressive, and you know, the key thing was I really wanted to play it. I was really excited, even given the fact that an hour a week we talk various degrees of sense and or madness about GTA.
Yeah.
I was still excited.
Do you know what? I went into it with a slightly concerned that given our, you know, what we've learnt about GTA over the past however many weeks we've been doing this, how the sort of infinite level of detail we've gone into, that there it might not pack any surprises. And I know that sounds weird, given that a lot of what we talk about, we take confirmed facts and kind of extrapolate out and you know, let's be honest, speculate on some of this stuff.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You know, I worried that we go in and there wouldn't be any surprises there, but I mean, it was a world that, aside from very few games I've played this generation, I just wanted to get into, like you say, and just wander around. I mean, I can only think of stuff like LA Noire got me the same way. I just loved that kind of setting, but it didn't have that sense of, although there was freedom, it didn't have that sense of kind of being able to, this sense of diversity in it. But I love that setting. Red Dead is obviously another example. BioShock, first half of BioShock Infinite, just being soaking up this world, you know, and like this sense of being in a very special place. And that's perhaps, you know, one of the biggest compliments I can pay it, really.
Amen, brother.
So thanks for listening this week. Yeah, please, as I said before, do comment below. Ask us any questions you like. We'll try and address them in subsequent shows. Dan, you're off to have a baby. Not you in particular, but your lady friend is off to have a baby. So Dan might not be here depending on when the call comes in. But we're going to try and rig him up to Skype so that we can keep Dan's expertise close to hand but it'll depend when the little.
If we're not in active labour, I will do my best to report and add any layer of insight to anything Rockstar might release over the following days and weeks.
But we've certainly got enough to keep us going for a good while yet. So Dan will be back in the saddle after paternity leave, and we'll be chatting the usual stuff. But that's not to say the show won't be here while he's away. We'll keep the show going. We'll talk about all the stuff that we weren't able to cover today. Like I say, ask us questions. Get in contact via our Twitter account, GTAVOclock, where we'll be, we keep you up to date with everything GTA 5 related, including links to the show, other things, other fan sites and people in and around the GTA 5 universe are posting. Subscribe now, please do, because that way you don't miss a show. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.